Hello and welcome to episode 129 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps. Shane, you're on the trading floor today? You buying JCPenney stock or what?
Stanislav, I'm in Chopper 5. I'm looking down at the traffic. We have the people at home. You're not going to be able to hear this. You're not going to be able to see this. We have new headsets on. One of the very few things that we have used our hard-earned Patreon money in terms of Patreon equipment, because we wanted to see if Stan could move around like he wants to do and not have weird audio.
And I have been.
Now we look like a boy band. I like it.
Yeah, it is cool. I like that these headphones have two output cables.
I mean, it's basically it's a microphone attached to bad headphones.
That's how you know they're really cool and not some kind of weirdo audio gear. Is when they have two outputs, then you know it's really made for usability.
Well, it's not USB. It's
XLR, Dave.
Yeah, it's XLR and a quarter inch.
A quarter inch, baby.
Got them both.
If we decide that this doesn't sound as good as you would expect, we will go back to our old setups, but we just wanted to test something.
I think it sounds pretty good.
We will take these back to Sweetwater ourselves.
Is that the Godfather?
Yeah, that's the Godfather, Dave Harburger.
Look, Dave just stood up, and he was still on the mic. And when Dave's on the mic...
So I'm going to step outside and make myself an omelet real quick, and I'll just stay on. It's going to be no big deal. So if you hear any sizzling sounds, you just know it's my good dinner happening right now.
Guys, can I ask you a question? What kind of butter or oil do you use when you make eggs?
Kerry whatever. What's that?
Kerry
Irish
Kerry
butter,
whatever?
Yeah.
You use proper butter.
Well, yeah, man. I use butter for everything for that.
Wait, what do you use? Pam?
I use just like a little dot of olive oil.
I mean, that's an option. I've been using. We switched almost entirely to like vegan butters, and they actually the Mikos is really good.
I can't talk to you about food anymore. It's just like I don't even want you to participate in these questions because I can't believe what's happening.
But I also made like 4 pizzas in the last 2 days, and they all had loads of real cheese.
Vegan,
so it's not like
vegan pizzas.
No, that's a monstrosity. Sorry, vegan friends out there.
Yeah.
Maybe you can use that fake synthetic cheese that they put on pizza in St. Louis.
Oh, Provel?
Yeah.
Is it fried ravioli? At any rate, I'm back from my secret mission that I was on last week. Yeah, I went on a mission with one goal in mind, and that was to... Oh, wait. Sorry, hang on a second.
Oh, Dave's getting a phone call.
This classic bit.
Hello? Oh, yes, sir. Yes, I'm on the phone with them right now. I'm going to tell them what happened. Yep. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. So that was the president of podcasts calling to give us a congratulations, because you may not know, but I was on a secret mission last week to get our 1,000,000th download.
That was you.
Oh yeah.
That was me. Well, I had to go and secure it and make sure that it was verified. It went in the ledger, that it was blockchained and all those kind of things. And President Podcast was there with me. And they're just calling to say thank you for our service to the podcast world. And we just want to say thank you to all the listeners, because weirdly, we did actually have our 1,000,000th download of the Dive Down last week.
Dave, I already forgot that happened.
I know.
I can't believe it. I've moved on to 2 million.
I have a question. You know how you never forget where you are during a big event? Where were you when we got our 1,000,000th download?
My sofa.
I was asleep, and then I realized Shane put a picture of it in the chat. Yeah.
Can I tell you where I was?
Please.
I was at a bar, and I was checking my phone every couple hours because we get the numbers refreshed every like 2 hours on our podcast service.
Yeah.
And when the number came in that it was 1,000,000, I put up my phone and shouted to the bar that my podcast just had its 1,000,000th download, and the bar cheered for me.
Really?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Did they buy you around?
Sorta.
What bar were you at? Can we give them a plug?
I was at the Marquee Lounge on Halstead. It's like Halstead and Armitage, I want to say.
Very nice. Yeah, Marquee Lounge. Thank you so much, Marquee Lounge, for supporting. Well known as President Podcast's favorite bar, Marquee Lounge in Chicago. Anyway, we didn't bring this up to like pat ourselves on the back. We just wanted to say thank you to everybody for helping us get to this absurd milestone that we never, ever even conceived that would be possible when we started this podcast 2.5-ish years ago. And I thought it was interestingly appropriate that it was an episode that I wasn't on, and also an episode that was about the second half of the Modern Horizons 2 set review. Very prescient timing.
Yeah, perfect timing. Thanks to all the listeners. Thanks to all the patrons, everyone who's supported us. I do want to thank my wife, long-suffering wife of mine.
That's a good point.
The early part of doing this was definitely a lot of work. She just peeked her head in on camera. So thanks to all the significant others out there and all the patrons and all the people who have supported us and all the guests we've had. We haven't won an award or anything here, but it's been an awesome 2.5 years, and I want to thank everyone who's been a part of that.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Shane.
We're going to cut half of that out of the actual episode, but not the Skype sound.
All right, now that the congratulations are over, on this week's episode, we admire an ever-growing Modern format and go through last Friday's Modern League 5.0 deck dump listicle of record to chat about new decks and technology showing up from Modern Horizons 2. We also tested out a bunch of different decks ourselves, so we're going to cover some of our own experiences exploring the format. It's going to be one big breakdown, stew, gazpacho episode.
Yeah, we've never tried this format. I'm kind of hyped to test this out. There's a lot of new decks here. There's a lot of new stuff. There's a lot of new cards. Wait and see how this falls out. We might be like, well, there's 25 more decks we didn't get to. Good luck. Read them yourselves, friends. But I think there's a lot of new cool tech out there. There's a lot of Modern Horizons 2 cards being played in general. So I think it's just a great way for us to talk about decks and talk about how the cards are informing new and old decks.
Before all that, though, let's housekeep for a second. Shout out to the newest patrons to join the Dive Down Nation, Grakatal and Alex H. Thank you so much. Also, we have a new review.
Oh, I didn't look at it yet. I usually look for the reviews.
It's a very interesting username. I'm sure it's someone who's had a Apple iTunes account for a very long time. Their name was Unban Opal.
We can't endorse that here, so please reject this review.
If you made an Apple iPad or an Apple podcast account just to leave us a review, thank you. And if not, also thanks for taking the time to do that. Unban Opal and everyone else. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. All one word. You can also support the show while playing Magic Online. Test out these new Modern Horizons 2 cards yourself over on Mana Traders with coupon code TheDiveDown2021, all one word. Get 15% off your first 2 months. And from a personal note, we can see all these people who have been signing up lately, and we are so grateful that you use our coupon code. It goes a long way for us, and we thank you very much.
Yeah, this is going to support me getting a few more Modern Horizons 2 cards.
Speaking of...
Oh, I know that sound.
Dave's about to crack a pack.
Dave, is that a golden ticket?
Do I have to do a jig now? Have you all opened many of these packs? Stan, I think
0.
you had some cards, right?
Yeah, I opened a set booster box and a pre-release pack.
Amazing. How'd it go?
It went really well.
I'm so jealous of y'all. I mean, I have 2 set booster boxes coming from an online store. I guess that they're not shipped them yet.
Well, I am partway through a pre-release kit that I picked up today from the lovely Dice Dojo in Chicago, and my rares that I've opened so far include Sylvan Anthem and Rise and Shine, Profane Tutor, and Garth One Eye. So, not great so far. We'll see what happens.
Bud.
Yeah.
Damn.
Our the Patreon opens, the Slack opens have been absurd. So many good boxes.
Boxes are good.
That's what made me thrilled to go out and get one. But you know what? I'm so bad at cracking packs that I would not be surprised if it's just all Garth One Eyes for me all the way down.
I'm dreading opening mine. Dreading.
Don't do it.
I have a lot of bad boxes.
Just keep it in your closet forever.
I might.
Shane, remember when you opened that box of Modern Masters 17 and there was one fetch land in it and nothing else?
Yeah. There's literally one fetch land and nothing else of value.
Yeah.
I opened 4 fetch lands.
Well, good for you, bud, my dude.
On this week's episode, we're just going to talk about all the cards I opened in my one box. But before all that, let's jump into the dive down, where this episode is powered by both the 5.0 deck dump and a spreadsheet that we made.
Yeah, we got a spreadsheet. We got I have both the Magic Online League page and the Goldfish League page, just in case I need to jump into another thing. So there's so much to look at right now.
So I'm thinking maybe the way we structure this, before we actually start going deck by deck and really calling out new iterations on old strategies, new strategies that are emerging, new cards that people are testing with, do we want to go through some of these quick stats to provide some high-level pictures?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea because we did spend the time to do these counts. And it was more than a Control F, I'll tell you what. I think what's important about this, though, is that these aren't frequency counts because you probably know this. Most people know this. But for a deck to be in a deck dump, it has to be significantly different enough, like 15 cards-ish or something like that, for it to be automatically sort of categorized as a new deck. So if the deck is similar enough, then it's not going to show up as a separate deck in the dump. So there might be, 100 decks with a certain card, but it might only count 10 of them because, 90 of them were the same deck or something like that. So, bear with us. It's just kind of an idea of different enough decks that cards are finding homes in, which I think is interesting enough too, just because it's like, hey, this card has broad utility. It's in a lot of different decks that might be similar or it might be wildly different. So I think the first thing we should look at is the new cards, the Modern Horizons 2 cards. And let's look at the frequency count. How many of these 99 decks that are in the deck dump did these appear in?
It's the Dive Down Hot 99.
That's a big deck dump, 99.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember there's been, it's always this way, right? With like 100 plus ish, I think maybe last week or something like that. And it's already sort of whittling down a little bit. But yeah, 99 is buck. Okay, the number one card from Modern Horizons 2 that I could catch at least was Solitude. 18 decks had it anywhere from 4 to 1 in the main. A few had some sideboard ones along with being in the main. 11 of those were Ephemerate decks. And Stan, you did some nice work looking at the archetypes of which Solitude appeared in, right?
I did. And, the set is new. Maybe we should, as a courtesy, just acknowledge what these cards are, just in case people are still learning them. Solitude is the white pitch elemental. It's the one that has the Swords of Plowshares effect.
So
thank you.
2 Plowshares.
Sure. 18 Solitude decks. 11 of them were Ephemerate decks, which I think is going to be a card that we'll talk about a lot today, is Ephemerate. But some of the archetypes that were running Solitude include Black-White Ephemerate Stoneblade, Blue-White Stoneblade with and without Ephemerate. Also, just like regular Blue-White Control, there was a Blue-White Control deck that also had Urza, the 4-mana Urza. I saw Bant Ephemerate and Soul Herder deck, so kind of the deck dive we had done in the past. Black-White Ephemerate decks, as well as Black-White Reanimator decks, as well as Black-White Reanimator decks that also had Ephemerate.
Mm-hmm.
There's Esper Blinkblade decks, Abzan Ephemerate decks, Black-White Shadow.
Yeah, it's just a good card. It's a good card in white, which, people used to say Modern didn't have those, and now it has more than a few.
Yeah, I'll say, I think given the tenor on social media this weekend, surprised that this is the number one card on our list because I think it's tied for the card that everybody else kind of acknowledges is the runaway breakout card out of the set.
Yeah.
Am I right or am I right?
Which one are you talking about, Dave?
I am talking about Urza's Saga, which is also in 18 decks in this dump. Is that right, Stan?
That looks correct. Urza Saga is, of course, that land that is also Enchantment Saga. And this one is a little different from Solitude because Solitude seems to appear in a lot of similar style decks. We see a lot of Ephemerate, Blinky, Control, Stoneblade-ish variants. Urza Saga was used in all different types of strategies. We have the Asmore Cookbook and Cat Oven deck. We saw it in Lantern Control. I think there were 2 Lantern Control lists in the deck dump. Mm-hmm. Affinity, a Hardened Scales deck, an Asmore plus Urza control deck, that Azorius Urza control deck I was mentioning earlier. Mono Blue Tron, Mono Green Tron.
I did not see it in the Green Tron. Maybe I wasn't looking closely enough.
You gotta look closer, Shane. Amulet Titan, which is a deck that people are talking a lot about lately as one that abuses Urza Saga in particular. Hammer Time was running it. Even Food Gak.
Just everywhere, this card. People are up in arms about how good this card is and how easy it is to play. But one thing that I think is cool to see is that it has put a real revitalization into artifact-based payoff decks that have kind of been dead since Mox Opal was banned. Who knows if that's good? for the format forever, but seeing Affinity come back and Lantern Control come back and Hardened Scales come back and a little bit of Urza come back, I think is all stuff that has been probably heartening for a certain subset of people that listen to our show and just love Modern in general. So I say good for you all. Until I have to play you, then we'll see.
Yeah, I think we have a lot more to talk about in terms of Urza Saga, perhaps a little bit later. I think it's not it's definitely a hot button topic. It's worth talking about. Because we have so many decks, I think we should, let's just go through this. 15 Counterspell, 12 Cauldra Complete, the new Stoneforge Mystic friend, 11 Dothy Voidwalker. I may have mentioned that I thought this card was bonkers. We had 7, what's weird for me though is 7 of these were in the sideboard. So it's basically playing it as like kind of a walking Leyline of the Void. Only 4 decks had it in the main. I'm curious if that ratio will change over time. 10 Grief. Grief was perhaps the most hyped card. Mm-hmm. The card that people are most afraid of, perhaps maybe besides Urza Saga. I think, because Urza Saga was so early, people kind of forgot about it, and they were talking about things like Grief. 7 of those Grief decks were Ephemerate decks, which is kind of the wombo combo that everyone is very afraid of. Or I think maybe it's more fair to say that this was attempting to take advantage of Ephemerate as an option. Because I did notice some decks where it was like, okay, this deck's throwing Ephemerate in for perhaps some Stoneforge value, for perhaps some Grief combo value, but it's not like a blink deck. But I think that people are testing this. They want to see how good is this combo. Dave, you just opened one of these. 9 Shardless Agents.
I did just open one.
Shardless is seeing play in tons of decks. It's just good, I guess, or it's good right now. We've got Living End, the Domain Zoo decks, the Glimpse of Tomorrow combo-ish style decks, Temur Footfalls, Cascade decks, 4-color Footfalls. Even I saw it being tested as a 4 of Inhumans. So Shardless Agent, value card. What else do we got, gentlemen?
Well, we have the card that I completely whiffed on in our set review with Everett, Prismatic Ending, with 9 different decks playing it. Surprise, surprise. Ragavan, hype card itself, was in 8 decks, including Mono Red Obosh, Domain Zoo, Obosh Panza, Rakdos Shadow, Rakdos Midrange, Grixis Shadow, Izzet Prowess. Endurance was in 7 decks. Asmo, Stan, say it for me.
Stan's got it, not me.
I need to see it to say it, but I think I can actually do it from memory now. Is it Asmor, Animar, Decay, Daystanak, Uldakar?
That's really good, Stan.
Seems fine to me. 6 decks with Asmo, 6 decks with Dragon's Rage Channeler, 6 with Subtlety, 6 with Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. Why don't we cut it there for a second?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cards that are clearly making an impact. I mean, the Asmo decks have been all over the place. People have been loving brewing with Dragon's Rage Channeler. That Surveil is so good.
Yeah. I'm curious if I'll be eating my words on DRC. Like, I think here's the main thing. I think it's going to be in decks that I was not suspecting, or that decks that are designed to take advantage of it, and it's not going to be like the normal kind of red card. But I'm curious at how long it will be sticking around as I'm working to get Delirium enabled early type thing, or if that's just kind of a consequence of playing Modern these days.
I think the first line of text that it surveils whenever you cast any non-creature spell, and that includes Bauble in addition to instants and sorceries.
Yeah,
I think is the kind of the thing that really pushes this deck into insane value, because it lets you filter your draws while sometimes playing cantrip effects. I actually think this card is kind of here to stay.
Surveil is really powerful, especially when you can repeat it like this. So
yeah, especially if you can toss it into a Luris deck as well.
It's in a lot of different kinds of decks, which I think is cool. So we'll talk about those as we go through the list. We don't think we need to read like these 5, 4, 3s, and 2s. There's some stuff that's surprising me in how little it was seeing play. Like one of the ones that I'm most surprised by was Suspend. I mean, I'm not actually surprised by this because I don't think Suspend is that good. Only 3 decks were running Suspend, which seems kind of like a card that could be played fairly ubiquitously in a lot of blue decks. Only 3 Imperial Recruiter decks, which is a little bit of a surprise because I think Imperial Recruiter was sort of seen as like a widely usable red human in a lot of different sort of tutor-up style decks. Only 2 General Ferris and 1 Blood Braid Marauder. I think some people thought this card had more legs. It maybe does have more legs. I think it's maybe harder to use than some of the other cards, and also a little bit less exciting for certain people out there. I think let's briefly hit these I noticed some old cards that we're seeing maybe a little bit of a resurgence. Like Stoneforge was in 19 decks. 12 of them playing Kaldra. I think that's too few. I think it might need to be 19. 17 decks with Luris, 14 with Leyline, 13 with Teferi 3, 8 Yorion.
There's also 11 Ephemerate decks.
Oh, thank you. That's fewer than it seemed. I felt like everything had Ephemerate when I looked through that list. Liliana, 7 Liliana decks. Is she back? Maybe. It's nice to get stuff in your graveyard sometimes. Y'all, have you noticed Malakir Rebirth?
Yeah, in my draft chaff pile.
7 Malakir Rebirth. That is one of the flippy lands from Rise of Zendikar or whatever, Zendikar Rising. And it basically, it rebuys a creature out of your graveyard?
Single black instant. Choose target creature. You lose 2 life until end of turn. That creature gains when it dies. Return to the battlefield tapped under its opponent's control. Or under its owner's control.
This just has to do with the pitch cards, doesn't it? Isn't this just another way to get a low opportunity cost card to keep subtlety around or keep grief around or keep whatever around?
Oh, good call.
Right. It has a similar effect as Ephemerate, where if you do grief on turn 1, if you have a single black mana, you can Malakir Rebirth it back to the battlefield immediately. Get 2 cards out of your opponent's hand.
Yeah, and you keep the creature.
All right. Final quick hit stats. Only 12 of the 99 decks had no Modern Horizons 2 cards. I think it's actually 11. I found one, the green Tron one that Stan mentioned. So what? It's like
that would be 12%. 1/9. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's like 11%.
Yeah.
11% of the decks, no new cards. That is pretty impressive. We knew this would have a huge impact. Modern Horizons 2, and so far it looks like it. 4 of the top 10 creatures were from Horizons 2. That is a big impact for me, in my opinion. Solitude, Grief, Shardless Agent, and Ragavan are 4 of the top 10 creatures played in this dump. Solitude was the 5th most played card overall, and the impact of all these graveyard strategies made Leyline of the Void the 7th most played card.
It was certainly everywhere when I was playing last night. And I had it too. Everybody's Leylining.
Solitude was the only MH2 deck in the top 10 most played cards as well.
Yeah, it's that doesn't surprise me. What I think is interesting is I think the biggest things that we noticed in Horizons 2, and perhaps we can talk about this at the end of the episode, which we won't have time for, but I feel like we got a lot of creatures as spells. It kind of continued the contemporary Magic design of all of your creatures are also spells type thing, very quite literally with these evoke ones.
Totally. So when we look at this Goldfish data, among the top creatures, as you put it, 4 are MH2, but among top non-creature spells, none are from MH2. And that strikes me as kind of the impact of the format, at least in the first week or two, where these creatures are crazy pushed and they have really powerful effects, but we're not seeing really significant instants or sorceries coming out of this set.
Spells are boring. Creatures are where it's at.
They do turn sideways, unless they have Vigilance, the worst ability.
That's right, because you don't get to turn it sideways. You don't get to turn Lightning Bolt sideways.
Tap to sack Seal of Lightning Bolts.
Fun. I would play that card. Okay, that's a lot of numbers and stats. I want to talk about some actual decks so that we can start sharing some input into what we played with.
I'm mad that I wrote a lot of those numbers because now I'm like, those were boring. Let's talk about decks.
What is this, the numbers episode? Here's an interesting MTGO player, the first person in the 5-0 dump. I'm not sure if y'all have heard of him, or them, rather. It's Canister?
Huh. That's a weird way to spell canister.
Canster?
Yeah.
It's Canister.
I used to like to download Metallica from Canster. I'm sure people have made that joke about him a zillion times, so just go on and go on.
So Canister is playing an Animar, Decay Days to Neck, Uldacard deck with Karn. It also has the whole Witch's Oven combo in addition to Oval Chase Daredevil.
Yeah, here's what this is, right? This is mono black food. That's what this deck is really, right? It's
sure.
It's taking the engine that everybody was messing around with in Jund and messing around with in Rakdos and messing around with in Golgari and said, I'm going to play Bloodghast to use that as something that I can sack to my oven as well. And maybe kill you with Bloodghast later, but it's mono black food, and it's a pretty interesting take on the deck, I think, as well.
Yeah, the most interesting thing for me, at least, is this has an infinite turn combo. Like, this is the only Asmo deck running Karn the Great Creator.
Oh,
Okay, in this whole list.
Yeah.
Karn can get Time Sieve. Time Sieve is a blue and a black. This actually has access to Dimir mana. None of the main is needed. Time Sieve is blue and a black for an artifact that when you can tap it to sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. If you have certain board states, such as 2 cookbooks, an Oval Chase Daredevil, and let's say an Academy Manufactor, you are making 6 artifacts very quickly. So you can create board states that will give you infinite turns, which will win you the game, typically.
Whoa, I totally missed that when I was looking at this list. I just thought maybe this was like a good, like, svelte kind of version of this idea, but that adds a whole different dimension to it.
I will give you one guess who told me about that combo, and it might be a Mickey S.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey S. But, I mean, this is an appropriate deck for us to start with, right? Because it has 4 Asmo, it's got 4 Underworld Cookbook in it, it's got 4 Urza's Saga in it, it's got 4 Academy Manufactor, which is a card that I think a lot of people overlooked a little bit when we were going through spoiler season, a little bit overlooked. So it's got a lot of the kind of iconic cards, or the cards that made the first waves in this first week, all here together.
Yeah, these are good cards. It's good deck. Probably we'll see if this is the one that keeps living. But let's move on. What do we got next?
MKC playing Living End, pretty standard cycling Living End deck, and their only new card was Grief.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of Living End variants. Well, four different Living End variants, which tells you about how much Living End was probably being played in the leagues when you had 4 different Living End variants showing up in this list. So yeah, we'll talk about those in a minute. Up next, Knister. Again, he is on one of the Lantern Control variants, also running for Urza Saga, because guess what? Free artifacts can be good. So yeah, all it really took for Lantern Control to come back was for Knister to pilot it and for Urza Saga to exist.
Right.
Also, interestingly, 1 copy of Underworld Cookbook, no copies of Asmore.
Yeah, I mean, this deck is just not trying to do that. Like, it's probably just using it, Underworld Cookbook, as an engine to make tokens or maybe buy life or things like that. Like, I think Underworld, especially,
you can fetch it with Whir.
Exactly, we can fetch it with Whir. You can also fetch it with Urza Saga. More importantly,
forgot about that
as well. So you do get to toolbox it a little bit with this type of thing. You get to go get Pirate Spellbound if you want. You get to go get Pithing Needle, Mishra's Bauble, Lantern and Insight. So many cards in this deck are 1 or 0 mana to go get with your Urza Saga for whatever lock piece you need for the moment you are in.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. You know what's funny is
you forgot
Urza
about
Saga,
the most important part of Urza Saga.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like the making a ton of constructs in an artifact-based deck is like good enough. And then, there's also the tutoring element.
Yeah. Also, it's like, let me go get my Lantern because I'm ready to lock you out and kill you with 2 8/8s.
Yeah, so everything in this artifact package can be fetched by Saga except for the Singleton Witchbane Orb.
That's right.
Amazing. Up next, Blindside 09.
So this is a deck that I was really hoping was going to make a comeback, not because I love the deck, but because I think that it's a classic modern deck that got hurt by Mox Opal getting banned, and that is Affinity.
You just love Frogmite, Dave.
And it's got Affinity cards in it now. It didn't use when you were playing Affinity. It didn't even have Affinity cards, and it was it was just artifact aggro. It was like Opal artifact aggro, and now we have Frogmite in Affinity. We've got Thought Monitor, which is a card that I thought was going to make some impact, and I didn't get to talk too much about last week because I wasn't on the episode. But turns out that casting a 2/2 flyer for 1 mana that draws you 2 cards is pretty good in a deck where you're trying to beat down. And then it also has a Nettle Cyst in the deck as well, which I think is a nice card to have around as an extra cranial plating.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of were like, well, Nettle Cyst is no Batter Skull or something like that. I don't know if we were that harsh on it, but it's nice to have another effect like that, like a cranial plating.
I played a version of Affinity to prepare for this episode, not this specific version. I'll get into it once we get to that deck, but I was definitely cold on Thought Monitor before I played the deck, and in our set review, I thought it might be hard to actually get it to be a 1 or 2 mana spell, and it wasn't that hard, guys.
Yeah, I mean, like I think we talked about is like, if your deck's doing what it's supposed to do, then Thought Monitor is going to be great. And if it's not doing what it's supposed to do, then you're going to lose anyway.
More on that later. Anything else in this deck that you guys wanted to touch on?
I mean, there's 4 Urza Saga, but we knew that.
I still want to spend 15 minutes talking about it. Is that okay or no?
Okay, up next we got a Izzet Blitz deck. Nothing new in there, so I apologize. We're just going to skip it. Okay, yeah, it's perfect. Perfect. I mean, yeah, it's just there's nothing new in here at all. Maybe they were just, maybe it was just an old... They had a league still going. They were like, Izzet Blitz is still good enough to get a 5-0. Commandos 900. Obosh Red.
So far, so good.
Not that much new. Only thing new is, one Ragavan. They're like, look, I can't commit that hard to the most hyped card, perhaps, in the whole set in my mono red deck. And 2 Fury. They like Fury more than they like Ragavan.
I think it's a lot better than I thought.
That's really about it, right?
And we might talk about this later because I played it in
I think it's
Hollow
better than
Vine
I thought.
deck. There were 2 in the sideboard.
Oh, I didn't have one in mine.
And I got to do some sweet stuff where I cleared my opponent's board 1 turn with it, attacked in. They played Lingering Souls actually to try to block me, and then I used the activated ability of Underworld Cookbook to get Fury back and recast it again the next turn to clear their board again and killed them.
That's funny.
Pretty good.
2 of the Fury decks on here are Obosh decks. And thinking of this as a 6 damage first strike or something, it hits in for 12 damage, I think, if it connects
double strike,
with an Obosh. That's huge. And likewise, if you have Obosh out, all of the pinging it does to the board when it enters is doubled as well. So you can do as much as
spicy.
8 damage to a single creature if you play Fury with an Obosh out.
Here's my issue. I think that this deck has opportunity here. This is not how I would design this. It seems like why not have some Dragon's Raid channeler? You can toss Blood Moon to surveil, right? You can maybe even add some Tarfires here. I think it would be pretty straightforward to maybe increase your Ragavans, increase some Dragon Raids Challenger. It's surprising. I mean, of course, this is the card I said is overrated, but I can see it having space in this deck.
All right, up next we got Easton MD21 playing Orzhov, Stoneblade, Blink. All right, here's our first chance to talk about Prismatic Ending. They were running the full playset.
Yeah.
This is also a Solitude deck, of course.
The full playset as well.
And because it's a Stoneblade deck, why not throw in a Cauldra Complete in there?
And for Vindicate.
Yeah, don't forget Vindicate. I was going to say, and also don't forget that there's 3 Dam in the sideboard as well. This deck has a lot of pieces from Modern Horizons 2 in it.
Yeah, this is the first of many of these styles of decks that we have in this dump. And there's 6 variants of this deck. That says something about I think both the power and the customizability, the tinkerability, the tweakability of this deck.
I also wonder if Solitude is just a great creature to carry a sword. Often these decks are running Sword of Fire and Ice. And it's just swinging in. It's a 3/2 lifelinker with a sword. It's swinging in for 5.
I mean, I think it's probably not its primary use, but it's great for a long game deck like this. This is also the first time I think we can talk about the Batterskull Cauldra Complete duo. Right? And I did not play with or even against a deck with these this week, but I think something that I heard brought up on a different pod, I think, and I wanted just to sort of pair it here because I think it makes a lot of sense, is by playing Batterskull and Cauldra, you get access to both an aggressive game if you need it, or a defensive game when you need it. Cauldra lets you put a clock. You never had a living weapon like this to use with Stoneforge Mystic, because even Batterskull was not exactly the fastest thing in the world. Cauldra Complete comes down. It's a 5/5 haster. You know what I mean? You're putting a clock on an opponent that's trying to combo you out. Maybe a Titan style deck. You're getting damage in much faster than you did with the Batterskull. But then if you need Batterskull for your defense, for your vigilance, lifelink, you've got that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like being able to fetch for a Reality Smasher.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, sure, here we go. I played against this deck a couple of times last night, or decks like this a couple of times last night, and I was pretty impressed with Cauldra Complete. When they first went for it, I was like, I think I can do this. But, I mean, it also has Indestructible, which is absurd. Why does it have Indestructible?
That's a bonkers
what am I
card.
supposed to do with it? Yeah, it really is a pretty wild card, because what are you supposed to do with it? You can't really... it has Trample, So you have to like block it with a bigger creature. Then you lose your creature. If you bounce it, they can just re-drop it with Stoneforge again. It has haste, so they don't really lose that much tempo from bouncing it. So it's powerful. The only thing you do is try to outrace it. And so that's where you're at sometimes.
Well, you can get rid of the germ, right? Bouncing the Cauldron Complete itself is tough.
Oh, you can bounce the germ. Yeah, that's a great point. You bounce the germ and then it's exactly. So that is more effective than I thought I wasn't playing a deck that had bounce, so I couldn't have done it.
Right. You can also just upbraid the complete, right? You can any artifact.
It's indestructible.
It has indestructible, and it gives the creature it's equipped to indestructible.
Oh, okay.
So you can't do.
Oh,
either.
yeah, this is amazing.
Oh, yeah, it's bonkers, my friend. Yeah.
That was what I was thinking I was going to do. I was like, I have Ancient Chewer in my sideboard. I'll just hit the complete because it doesn't have indestructible itself, but it does.
Yeah, and so like it turns Stoneforge Mystic even into more of a must-kill threat than I think she usually is, and which is not something that I think that Stoneforge Mystic decks really needed, but sure, why not?
Spell Snare looking good.
Up next, Mastahoris on Electro Living End. I think the only thing that is Counterspell on the side. There's a lot of other decks like this I think we have to talk about with new cards, so let's move on. Up to Reflex.
How about the next one? That's also
weird. Living End.
Living End as well.
This is our Shardless Agent version. So the reason this works, y'all, is the only thing Shardless Agent can cascade into is Living End, because everything else is too high. So this then it gives it the option to either Violent Outburst or to Shardless Agent, and Living End is seemingly doing pretty darn well. It also
I'm not enough of a connoisseur of these kind of decks to know why you would choose the Shardless version over the one that plays Violent Outburst, and also I guess the main thing is you don't want to play Demonic Dread because that targets, and Shardless Agent does not target to come into play. So you still get your 8 Cascade effects in the Shardless version.
Yeah.
You don't have to play Demonic Dread, which is kind of like what we talked about back in the old Tybalt days.
Yeah.
Maybe that does make this version just better enough, but
just enough.
Living End's always been around.
I think right now, too, Living End is just like the kind of combo deck that doesn't rely on the graveyard in that weird way. Like, I mean, like you need your graveyard at some point, but like casting Living End sort of gets around some of the graveyard hate that exists out there. Like it can get around Grafdigger's Cage and things like that.
I'm into it. Up next, we've got Gracias por Tanto with Azorius Stoneblade Control. A lot of new cards here. 4 Solitude, 4 Subtlety, which is the blue pitch elemental.
2 Subtlety.
2 Subtlety. Yeah, for what it's worth. Not a full play set of those.
4 Prismatic Ending, 4 Counterspell. 3 Sanctifier on Vec in the side, and a Cauldron Complete to complete the.
And this is just basically what our new like Azorius Stoneblade control deck just upgraded.
Yeah, I mean the big thing here is we're maxing out on 0 mana interaction so that we can play Stoneforge under less cover than maybe we would have before, right? Like we can be a little more aggressive with playing some of our payoffs because we have ways to protect them with no mana. And there you go. It's just another take on it from what the black-white deck was doing.
I feel like anyone who owns a Stoneforge package should just buy Cauldron Complete.
Oh yeah, you have to.
It's one of the surest things we've seen from the early results of post Modern Horizons 2 Modern is that this card is very real.
I mean, I don't think anyone thought it wasn't real. I think the thing is, if people respond to it and they're like, well, I've got to be able to handle Stoneforge Mystic more reliably. I don't know what they would bring in to do that, or if they bring in maybe more bounce effects or something like that to handle Cauldra or to handle the Germ, like you mentioned, Stan, because the re-equip of cost is 7. That's a lot. So
that's true.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, for sure, Cauldra Complete, legitimate card. All right, a couple decks we can skip. We've got Izzet Storm. We've got
Esper Control.
We'll skip Netto and Kingarik. Thank you for your 5-0s, but onward. 2, Updraft Elemental.
Yeah, what's this one?
This is mono green Scales. So this is a deck that we've talked about a couple different times. You mentioned it last week, I think.
Yeah, we talked about Dom Harvey's win with it.
Yeah. So Shane, you played Scales.
I did not. I think Stan did actually.
So Stan, you've played Scales.
I did not. Dave, I thought that was you.
No one played Scales. That's fine.
So Yama Killer, you've played Scales before.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, guys, that was me this whole time.
Yeah, so I don't think any of us are good enough at basic math to be good at Scales. This is I think more importantly, if you want to hear what Scales, it's basically the same deck as last week. This is a little bit cleaned up, a little bit simpler, at least. I don't know if it's cleaner. It has more Arcbound creatures with modular. It has fewer artifacts. It only has a singleton Ozolith, 4 Throne of Geth.
It's got 3 copies of Arcbound Mouser, which I don't think appeared in last week's winning deck.
It did not.
And that's that 1-mana lifelink modular 1 cat.
And so this pushes the mana a little bit more into white. It's got the Power Depot, which does ETB tapped. Not great, but it has Razorverge Thicket, which is the Selesnya fast land. It's got some classic brush lands back from the Selesnya Eldrazi days to come back. So cool deck.
And of course, it has 4 Urza Saga. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah,
Powered by the power of Urza Saga, which can get you every creature in the creature package except for Arcbound Ravager.
Yeah, it's pretty good. This deck seems like it's back, so I'm happy that it's giving people who like that style deck to play.
Up next, Distant Hamster with green-black elves running a playset of Kyrian Ranger.
But what did it take out, Stan?
It took out...
What did it take out?
It took out 4 Llanowar elves, so it's just...
Brutal. What?
It has the 4 Kyrian, and it has 4 Elvish Mystic, and of course it's got Archdruid to make mana, and it's got Heritage Druid.
Excuse me. Stan, if you were going to pick one, are you keeping Elvish Mystic over Llanowar Elves? Like, what are we even doing here?
Dave, I know we don't usually use bad words in the podcast, but no chance in heck am I keeping
That's right.
Elvish Mystic over Llanowar Elves. They also had 2 Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, which is nice. I haven't had a chance to play any elf decks yet. That's something we're going to try to do in time for next week's episode, just because there's a couple elf decks here. They're all running the playset of Kyrian and some other new cards that we'll get to in a minute. I want to see if this can hang. Lava Dart seems to be on the downswing. Maybe Elves has a little bit of some clearance now.
What do you think, for those of us who don't know, so Kyrian Ranger is a card from Visions. It's a 1/1 for a green. It says return a forest you control to its owner's hand, untap target creature, activate only once each turn. Stan, what am I using this card to do?
Make mana. It lets you keep more 1-landers. It lets you do more tricks with some of your elves.
Okay. I like it. Like Elvish Archdruid, for example, lets you untap it to do double the mana, things like that.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a staple in the legacy version of Elves, and now it just lets you basically get to critical mass a little bit quicker. If you have something like Realm Walker and Elvish Archdruid, and you run really hot, you can just end up casting like 3-4 more creatures easily without a collected company.
That's awesome.
Seems good.
Okay. QB Turtle, Boros Burn.
Yeah, I think the
Nothing
only thing
new, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing worth talking about is perhaps no Flame Rift, but I'm not surprised by that necessarily.
I don't think Flame Rift is a burn card.
Well, I think people thought it was, but I agree. I think Modern is a game of small life total edges sometimes, and I don't know if you can hit yourself 4 just to be like, look, I have more 2 mana, 4 damage.
That's interesting. I always thought that Modern was a game of chance.
I mean, that too.
That's magic. Okay, underscore logic underscore with a 5-0 here with a Azorious Blink with Yorion deck featuring Solitude, of course. And then we have Sanctifier and Vec and Sanctum Prelate in the side for a little bit of stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, anything that we can legitimately say about this besides it's a Azorious Blink deck?
It's just, these are like bigger versions of some of the other decks that we saw in a way, right? You try to get all the way up to Yorion, so you have the giant deck. You have all these things that pay you off for flipping them when Yorion comes into play, but also you get to use your Flicker Wisps and your Ephemerates and things like that in a similar way if you want to.
Yeah, just value.
Yeah, you can also, if you have Aether Vial with 3 counters on it, you can cheat in your Solitude and then vial in a Glasspool Mimic to double removal your opponents while keeping a Solitude around.
Ooh. Oh, like with the Solitude on the stack type thing?
With the Solitude triggers on the stack. Yeah.
Beautiful. I did notice 4 Spreading Seas in the sideboard, which I think is tech people are starting to notice as ways to blow up Urza Saga, because when you do stuff like Spreading Seas or Blood Moon or things like that, or Tidebinder, or I think was that one of the ones that does the Spreading Seas effect? Like that just blows up Urza Saga. So
whammy.
Yeah, Blood Moon does too, I think, right?
yes,
Yeah.
a little bit slower.
All right, next up.
Spellvine.
Spellvine. Izzet Blitz. Hey, I get to talk about this Izzet Blitz for a second, huh?
Please do.
Yeah, do it.
It's got new cards. So these are the cards that I was surprised wasn't in the other version, which is someone trying to play Dragon's Rage Channeler in the deck and Murktide Regent in the deck. I have not had a chance to play this myself yet, but Dragon's Rage Channeler just seems so good for 1 mana. Plus, you get to mow through bad cards in your deck with Surveil. Seems like a no-brainer for this kind of deck. And then your Murktide Regent.
Treasure Cruise.
Is it? I did die to one of these last night. I'm still a little on the fence about this card.
I'm very on the fence.
I'm willing to assume that I'm wrong at this point just because so many people are playing it and having success with it. And, it is nice to be able to drop a giant flyer to try to close the game in these decks when you need something to help close the game, when you stall out a little bit with your little efficient ground creatures. But suddenly you have Dragon's Rage Channeler that helps here. One thing I'll say is this deck does not have Stan's favorite card, Sprite Dragon, in it. And I'm a little bit surprised that we are moving so hard away from that. But we'll see. Stan, what do you think about Murktide Regent?
Haven't seen it.
After watching it for this week. You haven't seen it yet?
Haven't seen it in the wild. Haven't played with it yet. Did you mention the Singleton Tarfire?
No, but it's a great point. Shane's brought this up a couple of times about using that as a enabler for
Delirium. So
your Delirium.
Tribal Instant.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So it has
Fancy Shock.
It's got 4 baubles and then a single tribal instant Goblin Tarfire to try to get Delirium a little bit more consistently. We'll see what happens. 4 counterspell on the sideboard, which is very reactive for an aggressive deck.
It's nice to have the option if you want it. I mean, think about it this way. When you're building this deck before, you would often have that kind of like 5 counterspell suite that was like, I got 2 Mana Leaks and I got 2 Spell Pierce and I've got 1 Spell Snare, like that kind of a disdainful stroke. And instead now you just get to run 4 counterspells in the sideboard and not worry about it. And I think that makes it a lot easier to sideboard.
Nice. It's the hardest part of the game. All right, up next, we've got Silva Terran with another green-black Elves deck.
Golgari Elves, I hear it's called.
This time they do have 12 mana dorks in the form of Llanowar Elves, Elvish Mystic, and Kyrian Ranger. Interestingly, they don't have any Izuri. Instead, in addition to Shaman of the Pack, their payoff here is Jaroga Warcaller. But since we're talking about new cards, they also have 2 copies of Sylvan Anthem, the green-green enchantment, which gives your green creatures +1/+1, and whenever a green creature enters the battlefield under your control, you also scry 1. 16 lands in this deck.
Lean.
That's one of the things that Kyrian Ranger, in theory, enables, is these very lean mana bases. 16 maybe too close to comfort for some people, but...
Is that because basically what we're saying is that it allows you that if you're going to miss your land drop, you just untap one of your creatures and replay the land for mana?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then if you have a hand that's just 1 land and a Kyrian Ranger and any other mana dork, you want it to be a hand that has Heritage Druid. But if it's not, even if it's just a Llanowar Elves, you can then get to like 3 or 4 mana basically on curve.
Sweet. All right. Charging Badger up next on 5-color Elementals. Skelemental. I think the only new card in there is what? There's an Endurance on the side and the one on the main.
A single Endurance main is what I'm looking at on one side.
Sweet. Cool. Way to go, Elementals. Doing your thing.
We'll get back to you later, Charging Badger. Next up.
We'll also get back to you later, Lightning Skelemental.
And Dr. Queller.
Dr. Queller.
Still doing it.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, Dr. Queller.
Bad spirits.
No new cards for you in this set, it didn't look like, but you still got a 5-0. Still love Bant Spirits.
All right. Next up, Ra 0 on Azorius Control with some new cards. Brainstone, Solitude, Counterspell, weird. It's a weird card. Sideboard Prismatic Ending, and Blossoming Calm. Stan, your sideboard call for Blossoming Calm is showing up a little bit. I played against a Brainstone Azorius Control deck when I was playing this past weekend. Did any of you play against Brainstone at all?
Haven't seen it.
It didn't seem great, but I think what it did do is give people an option on what to do with their mana when they were holding up counter magic, but then they were also leveraging Terminus. So I think they're trying to do like the Terminus thing, where they set up Terminus with either Jace the Mind Sculptor or a little bit earlier with the Brainstone thing. And this is also our first legitimate deck with Counterspell in the main. So I think it's a good time as any to talk about Counterspell and how you're feeling about it so far. Anything to say? It's Counterspell,
I haven't seen
right?
it yet. Yeah.
Only that this is the second deck with a playset of Counterspell in the main. The Esper deck we skipped over was running 4 Counterspell in Esper.
Oh, okay. And the Azorious Stoneblade deck. So, yeah, I mean, might as well talk about it on the third deck we've seen with Counterspell. Stan, how are you feeling about it? Like, do you think it's like, are you living in fear of it? Are you kind of like it feels like mana leak anyway?
I've been blown out by it, but that's what counterspells do, even if it's not actual counterspell. Because the counterspell decks aren't necessarily new brews, as far as I've seen.
Yeah.
Or at least they're not as many of the new brews that we wanted to explore for this week's episode. I haven't even had a chance to really play with it in an MH2 environment. But it looks like the thing that people were... worried is too strong of a word, but the thing that people were critical of, that it's just now correct to play counterspell 3 or 4 of them, seems to be true. Like, anyone who's playing any counter magic is running at least 3 counterspells, in addition, in some cases, to 4 Archmage's Charm, which is what this Azorius deck did.
They're always going to have it. That's what I would say. You can't maneuver anymore. Like, they're always going to have a counterspell that works against your spells. So just keep that in mind. You got to play around them.
What else is there to say about Counterspell that can't be said in this next deck by Ninja Kyle? It's an Asmor Animar Decay Dastanek Uldakar deck featuring 4 Emry.
This is like the one we talked about last week, Stan. That like the Emry, Oval Chase, Daredevil sort of like synergy. But it does add more of like this Urza package, right? Like Urza and Counterspell. I don't think that was in last week's deck.
I don't recall it there either. It also has 4 Thought Monitor. I can't recall that being in last week's deck.
Surprise.
Weird deck seeing evolution. How strange.
I am not smart enough to be able to talk about this deck at all.
Yeah, I think it's just doing Urza stuff, right?
Yeah.
But here's something that I find interesting is like, is the value off of Asmo really there to like say like the only way to cast Asmo is to discard a Street Wraith or to draw into a cookbook and then discard a card with it and then cast the Asmo, right? Like there's not a lot of great ways to get this out.
Yeah, but I think that all you're doing is caring about dealing 6 damage to things with your tokens. Like, that's it. That's what that card is there for. So you're okay with it later in the game, would be my assumption here.
I would also point out that you have 4 Urza Sagas that can fetch 1 cookbook that you then use to set up your Asmo.
It's weird how good that tutor is. It's strange. Maybe because there's a lot of cheap artifacts in Modern. Dave, you mentioned something awesome about Asmo that I got to do in some testing this weekend, playing Hollowvine. And did you get any chance to use Asmo and her food sack ability to just wipe people's boards?
Yeah, I got to use it a little bit. The deck that I was playing was the Hollowvine one, so it was a little bit more aggressive. So a lot of times I was doing other things and not quite getting up to that many food tokens as much. But yeah, it's powerful. I had some suspicions that ability might be powerful enough just because it's no mana and food is always easier to make than you think it's going to be.
Oh my gosh, it's bonkers easy. And I found myself playing against a Shadow deck, and they had got a little bit of a board stall where I had some Joker of a creature along with my Asmo and something else and a Vengevine. And so I had 2 food from Asmo, I had two cookbooks out. And then I untap, at the end of my turn, I sack 2 foods. I kill their 6/6 Skyclave shadow thing. I untap, I do it again. I toss 2 more cards. I kill their 5/5 shadow. And then it's poop. I thought, when you can do 6 damage off of incidental artifacts, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I even used the food a bunch of times to save myself against other aggressive decks. So
yeah, it's food. Yeah.
Food is the most broken mechanic ever made. I think Brian Gottlieb made that joke last week on Arena. It's not really the most broken, but I can't believe that one of the most powerful tokens they've ever made is called food.
Yeah, and sacrifice a food.
A food.
I mean, it's of course it's the cards around it. Like, it could have been a clue, right? It could have been anything. Right. It could have been like a Thopter. Like if they made all these cards that did so much cool stuff with a clue or like a Thopter. It's just the fact that like cheap incidental artifacts are as fuel for cards is almost like energy, where it's like when energy is incidental and you're just stockpiling a little, counter of energy that then feeds cards with like efficient energy usage. It's not really that different. It's just a different way to count.
It's a lot of food talk. What is this? Iron Chef?
Yeah.
Underworld
Cookbook. All as cuisine.
All right, up next. We're going to skip over this deck. It's Eldrazi Tron, no new cards. I will say I feel like Eldrazi Tron should be running either Urza Saga and or Cauldra Complete.
It might.
No, we'll see.
It might start.
But let's talk about Mono Blue Tron.
Well, before that, let's talk about how bad all his dust is looking right now in a deck like Eldrazi Tron. There's so many affinity decks, so many food tokens getting back stuff out of the graveyard. Do not need all his dust right now. But yeah,
yes,
Trellin. Mono Utron, only new card here is Urza Saga.
Only 2 Saga, probably needs 2 more.
Probably couldn't find the other 2 on Mana Traders.
I mean, that's actually a good point.
Yeah, and even in this deck, just for example, Urza Saga would get a Basilisk Collar, a Chalice of the Void, Engineered Explosives, Expedition Map, Relic of Progenitus, and that's it. But those are all pretty good cards for you to go grab.
So I guess you can get Chalice to block 0 mana spells, maybe if you're playing against a Cascade deck. Because remember, Urza Saga puts things onto the battlefield.
So you have to be wanting that.
Yeah, so getting something like Engineered Explosive might be incorrect, depending on what you're up to.
Well, not anymore. EE on 0 is pretty good now.
That's also true. That's also true.
It gets rid of food.
Yeah.
Tokens. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I guess, that Urza Saga could get Ballista and Hairback Walker in Affinity, and you're probably not going to want that either if you can't cast them. So.
Our mod, Mickey's, reminding us that you can't get XX spells. It has to be 1 or 0 with Urza Saga.
Well, that's a good reminder, because we're morons.
Hey, rules are rules.
We break them every week, and then we unbreak them in our apologies. We apologize to you.
Thanks, Mickey.
Well, why can't I get EE? Magic Online is bugged.
All right, let's skip this next deck. Selfie Seek, Sultai Midrange.
I love seeing the Selfie Sec is out there still, though.
Still playing.
Hey, old friend. Yep.
No new cards, though. We'll talk about you next week when you bring in some MH2 tech. All right, this next deck is one I played. Free Rollin'. It's Affinity. Azorious Affinity, I guess. It's got Sojourner's Companion, which is that new 4/4, 7 mana affinity for artifacts, and it has artifact land cycling too.
I cannot believe this is seeing play. Like this is what's telling me that like Affinity is better than I expected.
It also has 2 Mirror Enforcers, which is the other 7 mana affinity 4/4. And
my goodness.
4 Thought Monitors.
It just means they're getting to drop so many cards so fast that these become 0 or 1s really, really quickly.
And I think what makes this deck, or I know what makes this deck different from the last Affinity deck we discussed, is it's also running a ton of these 2-color artifact lands, the bridges. And that was the thing that really impressed me in Affinity decks, is how quickly these bridges both enable you to cast your Affinity spells for free or very little mana. Because what essentially happens is these Affinity, or these bridge cards, are just tapping for 2 mana for any spell that has Affinity. If you even need to tap mana at all.
Yeah, Stan, does this give you a clue why the artifact lands are banned?
It does. It sure does. But the other thing I'll mention, Thought Monitor in particular, it's a lot easier to get to Affinity when your artifacts are indestructible. And that was one of the things that I had a ton of reservations about, and it's why I wanted to play this deck, was kind of just challenge my previous assumptions, especially after I saw it doing reasonably well, is how well can we actually keep artifacts around for something like Thought Monitor, which feels fantastic anytime you cast it. And it turns out it's really easy when your lands are indestructible.
Yep. You all know that Mirrodin Standard was a dark time in Magic. My father was running the store at that time, and he was like, yeah, we had nobody coming to play Standard ever, and they had to ban like all those lands and other stuff to be able to try to revive the game at that point. So those lands are no joke.
Yeah. So this deck, it also has Urza Saga. And this,
No.
I don't think we've had a chance to talk about actually playing with Urza Saga, so maybe I can chat a little bit about what it does for this deck and what it's like playing with it in general.
Yeah, I would actually really like your insight, because I think there is the hype around it and the fear around it, where it's just like, this card is only doing broken things.
Yeah.
And then I think there is the thought that's also like, it's really good at doing certain things in certain decks, and then also like, oh, it's easy to kind of deal with. So tell us about how it felt in an Artifact Synergy deck.
It definitely can be dealt with, and people did know how to do that. But when it sticks around, at least in this Affinity deck, the thing I was especially impressed with was the second mode of making constructs, which is something that you can actually do twice, because you can activate that second mode on your upkeep the third turn that the Saga is around, essentially making two constructs with the same land.
Yeah, that I think is the one that actually scares me the most, where it's like, hey, in an Artifact Synergy deck, I'm not only a land and not only a tutor, but I'm pumping out creatures that are huge if you're doing what your deck's supposed to do.
Right. And in this deck, those constructs would frequently turn to 6/6s or 7/7s. And I thought that was awesome. And I'm sure it's been said, it kind of just felt like Urza Saga was replacing Mox Opal and giving this deck a glue. And even though this version of Affinity was not nearly as aggressive as old Mox Opal Modern Affinity historic staple was, it did feel like it actually had a very consistent plan. And I found that pretty good. Playing, Ornithopters in Modern feels bad, but even like Memnites was okay. Just having like a 1/1 that can always swing if your opponents aren't doing anything, fine. Maybe you can put a Shadow Spear or a Nettle Cyst on it. Okay. Don't mind if I do.
I mean, that's the plan, right? I'm a little surprised these things don't run Signal Pest anymore.
I think
for the evasion, but
the previous deck that we talked about did.
Was still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this one doesn't. This one instead is going for
4 force.
Yeah.
Okay. 5-color Niv pass, yeah?
Yeah, nothing new there.
No new cards.
Okay. Next one we have is from
Dimitricude.
Dimitricude.
This deck has so much going on for us to talk about.
We have this called Grixis Delirium Aggro featuring Luris.
Dragon's Raid Challenger. Our only Bloodbraid Marauder. I said it right that time. Unholy Heat for the first time, I think. Mm-hmm. And also Seal of Removal for the first time. A bunch of cool new cards to talk about. And I think for us to talk about maybe the future of this deck, or like what we think about this style of deck as we move into the format.
Ironically, Seal of Removal is not removal. It's just bounce.
Isn't that weird?
But
so, okay, first things first. Let's talk about Unholy Heat. A card that I think a lot of us slept on. This is beginning a lot of, I think, more attention because of Spike. Spike's been really into this card.
This is a card that I'm very sad I did not get to talk about on the show last week, because I had it on my list of stuff.
Yeah, this is totally a card that Stan and Shane would overlook, because there's so many other bangers to talk about. But what it is, it's a single red instant, deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Shane, that sounds bad. Oh wait, it has Delirium. Unholy Heat deals 6 damage instead if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. So yeah, if you're trying to work towards Delirium at all, or incidentally getting to Delirium, you can just tag a creature or planeswalker for 6. And sure, it doesn't hit players, but oftentimes for single red mana at instant speed, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Remember playing Lightning Axe sometimes to do stuff?
Yes.
Sure. Guess what? This does more, and it kills planeswalker, and it's magmatic. What's that called? Magmatic Sinkhole, without having to delve away your graveyard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I didn't play with it. I was watching Spike stream playing with it, and it was killing Tarmogoyfs left and right. It kills Titans at instant speed.
Boom shakalaka.
It's honestly maybe the best single red instant removal spell short of Lightning Bolt that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, Red has sort of needed something like this for a little bit, right? Like, it's restrictive. You can't use it as burn, but it gives it some play to be able to kill a Primeval Titan. And that's like something that you just didn't have access to
really good
out of
point.
Red decks.
I think it's more of a mid-range card than kind of an aggro burn card.
For sure. Yeah, but I mean, you just didn't have that tool at all. And for a minute, I thought that card that sees some play in Historic, that I'm trying to remember what it's called, the Blitz Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
What is it called? It's the 2 mana that does
Blitz of the Thunder Dragon.
Yeah, Blitz of the Thunder Dragon. I thought would be like enough at 2 mana to maybe make some waves in Modern, but this is just better.
Yeah. So let's talk about this deck on the whole and how it supports Unholy Heat, and maybe want to start running more. Mm-hmm. So this is quartets of Bloodbraid Marauder, Death Shadow, Dragon Rage Challenger, and Scourge of the Skyclaves. And then the usual kind of stuff that might be in a Grixis Death Shadow deck. You got your Hand Disruption, you've got your removal and like counter magic and Drawn the Lock. You've got your bolts, you've got your TBRs, Mishra's Bauble. This is doing 4 enchantments as well, which is helpful for Delirium. 2 Seal of Fire, 2 Seal of Removal. It's also a Luris deck where these seals are also really good. Let's talk first, I think, maybe about Bloodbraid Marauder, which is the run 1 in a red for a 3/1. Can't block. Sounds bad. Oh, wait, it has Delirium. This spell has Cascade as long as you have 4 or more card types in your graveyard. So basically, if you cast this, you get a free 1 mana spell, which in this deck is a number
Lots
of things.
Yeah, it's most of the deck you would be able to cascade into.
Yeah, pretty good. Also, Seal of Removal, is that maybe better than it looks? Like having just an on-board bounce effect that you can just sort of use at any time and then get back with a Luris, like that can't be that bad, right? Like just like you can always threaten. You don't have to keep mana up. It's just like, hey, I've got a bounce effect.
I mean, the seals are tricky. I think they're mostly here because of Delirium more than anything else. I don't think you generally try to play them on rates, although people often played Seal of Fire with Luris before, in the red-black Rakdos Shadow decks. I always found it like a little clunky, but it was good to be able to go into that grind if you needed to do like 4 damage to someone in a turn, to be able to like hit them, replay it, hit them again, kill a bigger creature with it. So I think having something in this deck that helps you get rid of a big creature over and over again is pretty helpful, especially since you're not running anything that interacts with giant creatures other than that. Like you're not running, black. Well, you have Drown on the Lock, so I guess that's kind of it. But
yeah,
I don't know if it's better than it looks. I think they're probably exactly as good as they look.
Exactly as decent as they look. Here's a question I have for you, though, before we got to move on. We got a lot of decks. Is Bloodbraid Marauder actually better than, let's say, Dreadhorde Arcanist in a deck like this? Because like this dies a Lava Dart. Lava Dart's going to be making a comeback when people keep seeing the Izzet Prowess decks, winning or top 8ing in these challenges. We're like, oh wait, it's not bad now. It's still good. Like I feel like Dreadhorde Arcanist is going to survive more reliably and get these cheap spells out of the graveyard more often than Marauder is going to out of your deck.
I just think this is a really different deck than what once Dreadhorde Arcanist. Like this is a more aggro slanted Shadow build than, I've played Arcanist in Shadow before as well, but you end up with a more kind of like, that's more like traditional Grixis mid-rangey one. This one is a little bit more aggressive, I think, in general.
Yeah, there's no Kroxa here.
Yeah. And also, do you care if someone Lava Dart? I mean, it's not great, but like you pay 2 and you get another card off of it. If someone Lava Darts it,
you're right. You don't have to untap with it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's fine. Lava Dart's the worst case scenario, of course, but what's next? Keep it moving. We got Boomer Jun next from...
Yeah, I called it that.
Rojanosa 5-0. New cards. Dalthy Voidwalker, Ignoble Hierarch, and Turok. So this is stuff that Spike talked to us about when he was on Stan, between Ignoble Hierarch and Dalthy Voidwalker. I mean, this is the deck that Ignoble Hierarch was made for, yeah?
But is it really? Like, I mean, this deck could have always ran birds. Always. Never ran birds. Or successfully.
It has Exalted.
I mean, yeah, that's better. But, like, does it need a card like this? Or is it just running it because it can to see how much it likes it?
Shane, were you playing Modern when Deathrite Shaman was around?
No.
Because what you get to do now is play turn 2 Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah, you could do that with Birds of Paradise, is what I'm saying. And people never ran birds, or when they did, they were like, oh, wait, it's not as good as I thought.
But
But Birds doesn't have Exalted.
you play Human Shane, you know how good Exalted is.
Yeah.
So, like, why are you fronting like Birds of Paradise and Ignoble Hierarch are the same card? They're not the same card.
I'm just saying in this deck. Okay, I'm not saying Ignoble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise are the identical card. I'm saying in this deck, I don't see how they function drastically differently.
It's, it makes your season higher. It makes all your creatures bigger. That's how it makes your Dalthy Voidwalker hit for 4. Like that's pretty good. Like, I don't know. I think that it's the difference is too big. Do I think that this deck is necessarily good? I don't know. I mean, it's not as good as, it's not anywhere near the same power that Deathrite Shaman brought to the deck, of course, but it is a good way to go.
Yeah.
I think it's also better in multiples than Birds of Paradise is.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
for sure. Like if you get a couple of these out, then you really are cooking.
Let's talk more about the cool cards in this deck. The cooler cards, I think. We have 2 Dalthy Voidwalker and a Singleton Torok. Cards that people did expected to see in mid-range decks like this.
This is our first Voidwalker deck, yeah?
I think so.
Have any of you played with the card yet?
No, I didn't get played with or against it. I didn't have time to play with it, and no one cast it against me, but I'm still afraid of it. It was in a lot of decks. It looks super dope. I can't wait to test with it.
We'll see. I'm feeling a little bit like that card is maybe the leader for the overhyped card out of the set right now.
I mean,
My guess.
I think what you said makes sense, Dave, which is like it's easy to look at the worst case scenario of this, which is just like, holy crap, they got my Emrakul. You know what I mean?
Which all the decks run now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all the fight against Mill.
Yeah. Torok is maybe just better, just like overall, like it's just sort of broader, more useful to like a deck like Jund than Dalthy, but we'll see.
Torok I think is cool as a one of. It's there's one in the sideboard, there's one in the main. I think the card is cool templating. It's interesting that they're not running it with Luris, so.
All right, man, I thought our pace was good, and of course, it's already looking not so good. Luxor 777 on another Orzhov Stoneblade Blink-style deck. They're leaning a little bit harder into the Horizons 2 cards. They've got Grief and Damn, but broadly, this is probably doing very similar things to the other Orzhov Stoneblade decks, just trying to figure out the right build on those. This does have a Sword of Hearthenhome, okay? Green and white. We'll see how long that sticks around.
Stopping your Vengevines, I guess.
I don't know.
Anyway, next up.
This is our first Reanimator deck.
Yep, ICT Mo 0912 Orzhov Reanimator. How's it working?
We've got 2 Archon of Cruelty. It does have 4 Grief, because why not? It does have 4 Priest of Fell Rights.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we talked about that.
Which is a card I played against, and it's good.
Grindy good.
It sticks around. If you don't have removal, it just will put an Archon or some other big monster on the battlefield.
That's its job, I think.
It really is. It's got a Solitude. It's got 4 Persist and 4 Unmarked Grave, which is, the 8-card package or a 2-card package that we definitely anticipated.
What's cool about this deck, though, I think, too, is it also is trying to do the Ephemerate thing. Because why not? It also has the whole Stoneforge package, like with the Battle Skull and Cauldron complete. This seems like an 80-card deck. Like it's doing so much. It has the Reanimator package. It has the Stoneforge package. It has the Blink package. It's just like, if you try to stop my Reanimator package, I've got Stoneforge for you. So good luck on that. So this is getting a lot of different angles and a lot of different powerful value, cheap cards in 60 cards here. I think this is a cool deck. Like if you like this style of deck, like I think this is the kind of Orzhov deck I would want to play. Like controlling, combo-y, graveyardy, Stoneforge-y.
I totally agree.
All right, next up is a deck that Stan ran through.
That's right. A hammer.
Yeah.
With Domain. This is the exact deck that I pulled. And similar to that Affinity deck with Thought Monitor, last week I was kind of cold on Domain. I didn't think...
Yeah. We said it was overhyped, overrated, perhaps.
We did say that. And I think specifically I even said I don't want to put Triumphs into my aggro deck.
Yes, you did.
And the hammer, they just used 1.
Yeah, who needs it?
Turns out it's all you need, potentially. New cards in this one. We got 3 General Ferris Rockrick. It's that Boros human soldier that makes golems when you cast multicolored spells.
Okay, I can't wait to hear your take on that, if you got much with that.
I'll just tell you, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it looks bonkers, right?
It was awesome because Lightning Helix would activate that, and that always felt really good.
That's good.
The issue with it in this deck is that you don't necessarily have a critical mass of gold spells. Because, like, Tribal Flames feels great to cast. You always want to cast it when you can, but it doesn't trigger. And Scion of Draco, Ragavan, Noble Hierarch, Ignoble Hierarch. So many of the cards just don't trigger it.
This deck is definitely not designed around Ferris. It's just saying, like, do I have enough multicolors to take advantage of it?
I can't believe how many new cards there are in this deck.
So many. I mean, the deck is designed from the ground up in Modern Horizons 2, basically, right? Like,
I mean, 6 of the creatures are new.
Yeah. So I think the deck exists because of Territorial Kavu specifically. That really felt like the
Goyf.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. It's better than Goyf because it also filters your hand. And that's something that always takes me by surprise, that it has this ability when it attacks, you can discard a card and draw a card. You can also alternatively exile up to one target card from a graveyard in case you're up against some graveyard strategy, though that was never relevant for me. But it hits for 5 really frequently, thanks to your Singleton Triome. And with things like Tribal Flames and this, it felt like the deck wasn't fast, but by turn or turn 5, closing is in sight because it's just punching so hard.
Yeah. I mean, when I played this style of deck, I had Kurt Ape and Loam Lion and Wild and the Cattle.
Yeah.
And now you have a 4/4 flyer, a 5/5 for 2 mana, and Ragavan. Cool stuff.
The last thing I'll say on this is I actually think that the Territorial Kavu Tribal Flames package is pretty legit. I don't think this is going to be the last version of Domain we'll see. It felt like the mana base wasn't tuned. It was sometimes hard to actually cast all your spells and have 5 land types. So maybe you need a different triome. Maybe you want to get 2 opposing triomes.
Only thing I'll say about this really quick is it takes a lot of practice.
Sure.
This style of deck, Tribal Flames decks, when I've played them in the past, it takes a lot of practice for fetching. You have to think way, way ahead. So
I think I did it perfectly every time. It's the deck's fault.
There might be some pilot error. You're a good player, but
I'm an okay player. I'm a much better pilot. Next deck, Leyline of the Boys. This
old favorite of the dive down Leyline of the Boys.
Red-white taxes.
Yeah, featuring Urian. All these Taxes decks are 80 cards now, basically.
New cards here are Solitude, Imperial Recruiter, Prismatic Ending, Cauldron Complete,
Sanctum Prelate in the main.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is barely Boros. Like, it really only has main deck Imperial Recruiter, and it also will help with your Prismatic Ending, and then sideboard like a Singleton Magus of the Moon.
I love that your 80 card deck has a Singleton in the side.
Well, you can get it with Imperial Recruiter.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So why not?
The one thing that's been interesting to me about a couple of these decks, real quick, Prismatic Ending. And we didn't mention it earlier, but I think one of the earlier decks that we saw, it only had blue and white in it. So it was only able to cast Prismatic Ending for 2, and this one's only able to cast it for 3, which means it's just good enough even with low chances to do Converge, which I think is pretty cool for that card as well.
Fun.
We got a half hour left. I think it's time for an old friend to come. Stan, keep talking.
Okay. Moon in 40. Abzan mid-range blink. It's got Grief, Solitude, Vindicate, and a sideboard Turok. This seems really fair to me. Really fair deck, but maybe Grief Ephemerate is good enough and like Blinking Rhinos good enough. I don't know. This is 2021. Let's move on.
Dave, the bell is hilarious, but it's so hard to talk when you're laughing at the sound of a bell.
All right, Merfolk in 10 words or less. What do we think?
Tideshaper and Civilian, I think, are really good additions. It's also one of the only decks running Suspend. Spreading Sea is also good.
Soim Bagalad. This is a Dakon Esper deck. So it's Esper Stoneblade. It's got 3 Dakon Shadow Slayers.
4 Grief, 4 Ephemerate. It's got the Stoneforge package. It's got 3 Solitudes.
Right, but when you say Stoneforge package, you're literally just saying Batterskull and Cauldron Complete. This has 2 targets.
That's all it is anymore.
That's all you need. You have aggressive. And
we're done with
defensive.
swords. No more swords.
That would be unreal, but I think it's possible.
Hold on, I actually want to mention the 2 Priest of Fellrights, but
why not?
No unmarked grave. So it's just playing Priest for value.
Yeah, I mean, it's a value card, right? I mean, a deck like this, it's value. Grind.
And I also like that Priest has Unearth, so you can, in theory, pitch it to Grief and then just get it back later.
And Dakon has Surveil.
You exile the card that you pitch, so you don't get to do that kind of synergy.
Thank you.
But Dakon's plus is Surveil too.
Right. So that's the thing. You get to play with Surveil, exactly.
I am observing a little bit of an experienced blindside for us with Stoneforge decks this week, so that's something I'm going to work on for next.
Well, you can. Feel free, my friend.
All right, again.
Jose 5 or J0 SE, 5-color Niv with Yorian. I believe they have 4 Vindicate. That's a lot of Vindicates. Why not?
That's it. Dave, how does it feel? Does it feel good to hit the bell?
I feel like I'm coming home.
Mattingly 23, I feel like very fast-paced now. White Taxes, it only has a few sideboard cards. Traditional-looking main deck, a few new sideboard cards. Boring.
We're sorry, Mattingly. Congrats on the 5.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, no, they're not boring. The deck does not have that many Modern Horizons 2, therefore it's boring this week.
It doesn't even have Cauldron Complete in its Stoneforge package. It's got a couple of Sanctifier on Vec in the side.
All right, next up, there's a Jeskai Stoneblade Delver deck piloted by C. Hauhi Ran.
Do you see what I see?
I see Delver Secrets and Geist of Saint Traft, so it's definitely 2013 up in this deck.
Yeah, it's Innistrad standard.
Let's mix the new and the old. We've got Prismatic Ending and Counterspell and Fire Ice and Suspend and no Planeswalkers from our like Delver control-y deck. Who needs them?
Yeah, pass.
Wow, brutal assessment of Delver.
And we don't need to talk about this another Azorius Stoneblade deck. Keep it going. Pansarin, congrats on your 5-0. Let's talk about Azorius Urza Control by
Brainstorm 39.
Brainstorm 39.
Oh, Brainstorm. We have a typo in our spreadsheet where it looks like
Brandstorm.
It looks like Brandstorm. Like I have some muffins coming after me.
All right. So we've got 3 Solitude, 3 Subtlety, 4 Prismatic Ending, again, 4 Counterspell, and 4 Urza Saga.
Yeah, but this is another one of those decks where Prismatic Ending only has access to 2 different colors of mana, which I think is really fascinating. You're like, I'm good. I don't need it for mana value more than 2.
No, it's a good removal spell.
Likewise, the only fetch target for Urza Saga is 4 Aether Vial.
What?
That's
it. Well, so this one's just using it to make constructs, huh?
I can't believe this deck is running Aether Vial. Like 4 Aether Vial for what? Like your creature package of Solitude, Subtlety, and Urza, and like Snap? It's just like, what in the universe?
2 Mystic Gate to make turn 2 counterspells easier. We got it. We got a filter land.
Good point.
All right, I played against this deck. I'll talk about it. I don't know if you all played with her against the Enchantress style decks.
Guys, I got to tell you, I opened my pre-release pack finally, and the foil that I got was the Enchantress, the Sithis. Boo. Anyway.
Sad. Maybe you can build the deck now because all of these Enchantress decks are playing the Sithis. The player who trophied is the Batman.
Oh, the Batman.
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, it's not really the style of deck I would pick Batman to play. This deck is slow.
Yeah.
But when it turns the corner, it turns the corner hard. So it does work.
New cards are 4 Sanctum Weaver, which is the 2-drop that taps for mana equal to how many enchantments you control, and then 4 Sithis Harvest Hand, which is the 2-drop. It's like extra copies of Enchantress's Presence on a 2-mana body. We did also see a couple or 3 Solitary Confinements, which is one of the new to modern reprints. It's kind of like a prison enchantment. Skip your draw step, you have Shroud, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sack Solitary Confinement, unless you discard a card, which doesn't seem so bad if you're drawing 1 or 2 extra cards every turn off your Sithis and Enchantress's Presence.
So this is an Island Sanctuary effect, is what we call this one. And
Unreal.
No, but I actually played against this deck last night too, and I lost to it because they just drew so many more cards than I had.
Yep.
So many more cards.
I played against this deck while I was testing out new versions of Panza, and I thought it was pretty easy for Blood Moons to kind of beat up on it.
But also it runs Blood Moon, which is wild.
Is that a typo?
But okay.
Maybe they just have a lot of basics. This one's weird. Okay, next up, Capricioso. It's Green Tron with 4 Urza Saga. I have not played with this. I don't know how good it is, but Urza Saga is good enough that why not?
So it still has the 4 forests. So can you help me figure out what are we taking out We don't have that Sanctum of Ugin.
No Sanctum of Ugin. Interestingly, it still has the Blast Zone. So it's man, what is not there?
There's no Ulamog in this deck.
Well, but yeah, but it just feels like, I guess we kept a similar amount of lands. They added a little bit more landage. No Ulamog. Yeah, I don't know, my friend.
The cat, Shane's cat, meowed at the same time as the bell. That's fun. Okay, here's a deck that I played. This list by Screenwriter NY. I'm assuming they're from New York. It's an As Foretold, Charlotte's Agent, Glimpse of Tomorrow deck.
Oh, no, not this.
This is kind of what Ryan Spain was talking about. His one modern deck is Warp World. Glimpse of Tomorrow is the suspend version of Warp World.
Look, how does this work, Stan?
So Glimpse has no mana cost. It's a spend 3 for red, and it says shuffle all permanents you own into your library, then reveal that many cards from the top of your library. Put all non-aura permanent cards revealed this way onto the battlefield. Then do the same for aura cards. Then put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. The first time I cast this spell, I actually had no idea what it was going to do. I just did my Charlotte's Agent thing to see what happens. And
what happened?
It got a bunch of Colony Gardens and a Kozilek Butcher of Truth, and my opponent scooped. Yeah. And that was the first thing I learned, is that this shuffles up your lands, and it will play more lands.
Well, let's talk about how you actually get this online, right? Like this is the kind of thing that's running like 4 to 6 main deck ley lines. So that you start with permanents on the battlefield, and then you could have a few more permanents on the battlefield by the time you cascade into it, or even cast it naturally off the suspend, and then just sort of turn the corner wildly with your Emrakuls and Kozileks and whatnot, right?
Yeah, so the idea is to just try to have as many permanents on the board as possible as early as turn 3 if you can, to either cast it off of your Charlotte's Agent or off of your Violent Outburst. And what it does is it tries to cheat out either big Eldrazi, it's got 4 Emrakul, Kozilek, and 3 Ulamog, or you can even cheat out an Omniscience, which will then let you play your expensive payoff cards from your hand for free. I think this deck is just kind of a fun little meme. I don't see this one taking over the format. This isn't like a new taking turns variant or anything. And it's also really inconsistent. It's hard to set up big payoffs. It was cool, but it felt like the weakest deck that I played.
So we have 50 decks to go, so I'm going to bell this down.
All right, well,
let's go.
We'll skip a few decks with no changes. Nazart with another Orzhov Stoneblade Blink deck. The main tech here appears to be Undying Evil, which an instant speed that gives a creature Undying until end of turn. This can work with your evoke creatures. Yet another way, just a different spell. Also, the foil of which has gone up quite a bit, because I think I have one in my Peasant Cube, and now it's like $25. So cool, thank you.
Good.
Ding.
All right, we got another Selesnya Enchantress. We got a Temur Cascade deck. Have we talked about the Temur Cascade deck yet on its face?
I played it. I can just share from experience. It's awesome.
I did too. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. People are hating it out.
I guess, yeah. I mean, it really folds to Teferi Time Raveler.
Yes, it sucks. Really bad.
So this is your going to cascade Shardless Agent into Crashing Footfalls deck.
Correct.
Everett was playing around with his deck, and he was really liking it. It's got that whole thing where you warp all the cards in it so that you only ever cascade into Crashing Footfalls.
Yeah.
I gotta say, the version I played, it's got 4 Shardless, 4 Violent Outbursts. It also had 4 Ardent Pleas. So you had 12 ways to get Footfalls out. And I was really impressed with a 4/4 Rhino's ability to close out games.
You know what's good about 2 4/4 Rhinos is how well they block together. So like they attack really well because they've got trample, of course, and then also like if you need defense, like you've got it, and like frequently one survives too. So it's just like it's really nice, and then you're frequently sort of just chaining them one after the other or something like that, and then you just have like 6 Rhinos and the game is over.
Yeah. And there just gets the point after turn 3 where it feels like you can potentially cascade into Rhinos over and over and over again. And that felt nice.
Yeah.
The interaction, should we talk about that?
What's that? Oh, yeah, the interaction's fine.
It's just fine. Subtlety is cool, though. I really liked playing with Subtlety, especially if I was casting it for 4 and keeping it around.
As I call it, the frilled Mystic version.
Yeah, the 3/3 flyer did its job as well sometimes.
Dave's moving us along. What are we on next?
We are on Silent Song, got a 5-0. We're not going to talk about the deck. Snow, Gruul, Scales. Looks like similar to the other Scales decks that we've been talking about, except for running just similar to the other Scales decks that we've been talking about.
This is basically the one that Dom Harvey won with, so
yep.
Right.
Listen to last week.
We'll go on. Tilt and Tumble, Boros, Prowess. This is your clever Luminmancer deck that has added Dragon's Rage Channeler to it, but it's basically the same deck that was there before. There's a couple of fun cards that are in here to make the deck hum. A couple of people I saw on Twitter were talking about it and loving the deck. I don't think we have to go into it more than that. Clever Luminmancer still has a place in the format. From there, we've talked about Ilton was on Domain Zoo. We've talked about that deck already. Angled Luffa, well-known Moto grinder, playing Dimir Lantern Control. I think we've talked about that enough through the canister version of Lantern, probably, although interesting to note that this one has 3 Dauthi Voidwalkers in the side for a leyline effect, and also, I guess, probably some value if you want to go that way.
Yeah, it pairs nicely with your 7 sorceries, which is Cobrews, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Thoughtseize.
There you go. Hugo Freitas, well-known Storm player, I believe, generally.
Yet another Orzhov Stoneblade.
Orzhov Stoneblade for control, but guess what? Sorry, Hugo.
I mean, this one's more controlling, so this is one of the ways you can be like, I want to play for Vindicate. I want to play for Dauthi Voidwalker. Like, that's where we're getting with this one.
Wow. Right. Dave, I don't think Shane heard the bell. He just kept talking.
I know. He went right over. Next up, Critic.
Yawg. We got to talk about Yawg for a second. We got our Grist, like we talked about. Singleton Grist, as we expected. 4 Ignoble Hierarch, as we expected. Singleton Yavimaya, as we thought might happen. And 2 Endurance in the side. This one is not running that sort of interesting Scurry Oak combo or value card tech here. I misspoke last week, and Slack regular Aaron reminded me that it was not the squirrel. It is, in fact, the oak upon which the squirrel climbs. That's doing some cool stuff. But yeah, this deck is gaining some steam. I think people are paying more attention to it. Perhaps you should too. It's a really good deck.
Why is Grist good in 5 words?
Because you can fetch it. All
right. We got another glimpse of Tomorrow combo we're going to skip.
That was 5 words, Shane. Nice job.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you playing my game with me. Next one is Scipios on Golgari, Asmo, Food, Cookin'. Yeah. So this is a lot like the canister deck, but it is instead, it's got your green cards in there too, notably Life from the Loam and Life from the Loam.
Yeah, this is what's weird about this one is I have no idea how this deck wins. Like, just like with Smuggler Copter beats, like, it doesn't really have good creatures.
It's got 3 Liliana.
Yeah, you kill people.
They just scoop to your Lily.
Sure. Okay, move on.
Here's how it wins. It's got 4 Urza Saga. It wins with constructs.
All right, our one of our humans decks. The only thing about this deck is as 4 Shardless Agent. I am not convinced that Shardless belongs in humans, but why not?
Wish Resign on the Rock with Dauthi Voidwalkers, Ignoble Hierarchs, and Turok themselves. What do we think?
Looks fair.
It's got your Grimflayer, Shane. I know
That's
you love
Grimflayer. Is Grimflayer really worth trying to make Delirium happen with Mishra's Bauble? Like, there's got to be better cards to play there, right?
Stop making Grimflayer is not going to happen.
Play more Turok. Play 4 Dauthi Voidwalkers. I don't know. I don't think it's worth it.
All right. Tubby Batman. So we had the Batman, and now we have Tubby Batman. I told you that I went as Batman one time in like spandex suit. I'm pretty tubby. Short Tubby Batman with an old style. So this Tubby Batman was on Arclight Phoenix. Is it back?
I don't know.
Is it here? Stan?
Could it be? I kind of doubt it, but let's give this deck its due. 4 Dragon Rage Channeler, 4 Murktide Regent, and it's got 4 Tarfire, which is new to the deck. A couple of Fire Ice on the side, as well as 3 Suspend.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how it actually sets up Phoenix's. It's Thoughtscour, Dragon Rage Channeler, and a couple Lightning Axe, and 4 Izzet Charm.
Sure.
Okay.
This is not how I build this deck. I think there's probably a better way to build, as we're seeing already emerge.
Same.
I do like Murktide Regent as your alternate threat in a deck that's playing Izzet Charms to fill up your yard.
Isn't there a little bit of tension between Dragon Rage Channeler and Murktide Regent? though, just a little bit. You know,
I see what you're saying.
you don't want to turn Delirium off by accident when you're delving, but we'll see.
Marshmallovsky
Yep.
playing Thassa's
Adnaz.
Oracle Adnaz with Profane Tutor.
That's it. Just Profane Tutor. Does that just get you your combo card?
Yep.
That's it. That's the deck.
That's it.
Orzhov Stoneblade by Easton MD21. We're going to skip. We're going to skip Living End by Master Horus, unless there's a reason to do it.
That one is using As Foretold Electro Dominance. Is that typically in Living End? Okay, then.
Yeah,
fine.
well, that's definitely a build that's existed for a while. And then we got Mental Misstep on a Stoneblade Shadow deck with all kinds of cards in it, all the cards that we've been talking about.
Orzhov, Shadow, Grief, Ephemerate, Grief, Solitude, etc.
We've talked about it a lot. Ramison on a Waste Not deck or like an Arcanist deck. We're going to skip that. Dr. Cheese, Gruul Panza. All right, buddy. Stan, this is your moment. Are these cards good? Ragavan, 4 Ragavan and 4 Fury in what is Panza.
No Ignoble Hierarch.
Yeah, so the version I was playing was running Ignoble instead of Ragavan, and the more I think about it, it makes me wonder if they are doing a similar thing. Because a turn 1 Ragavan, if it connects on turn 2, will get you to 3 mana on turn 2, the same way Ragavan can, assuming you don't have Arbor Elf or Utopia Sprawl out. This is an Obosh deck, so this is, I think doing more with like Obosh plus Fury and maybe also letting Ragavan hit for 4. Seems cool. Maybe I'll try this as well. Try to compare it. I really liked Ignoble in my Panza build, and it was one of those situations where I was doing really well, and I'm not seeing it appear in leagues, so I want to try to grind a league or two to see if I could prove it.
Makes sense. Is this the first deck we've seen with 4 Ragavan?
Yeah,
I think
that's
is.
amazing, and we're like 70 in.
Yeah. Yep. 70.
Batuhina had 4 Ragavan.
Okay.
That's the next deck.
Mussy 9950.
Is this
on Blue Moon?
Is this Blue Moon?
This is Blue Moon. It's got Blood Moons and counter spells and cryptic commands.
And importantly, 3 Murktide Regent and 4 counter spells. So cool.
See, I'm much more into Murktide Regent in this deck, I feel like, than I am in some of the other ones where people play it with, like I said, Dragon's Rage Channeler or in that kind of prowessy kind of build. Like, I feel like as a big, dumb threat in this deck where you can play it for 2 mana and protect it with a bunch of counter spells and win, that seems pretty good to me. But what do you think, Stan?
I agree. I love the use of Thought Scour here instead of something like Serum Visions as a way to both fuel your Murktide Regent, but also Ral is a really great win con that can remove creatures eventually with its -3, especially if you have a nice big graveyard. So there's no tension there because Ral counts cards in exile as well.
Yep. All right, onward. All right, we got Neptune with an Azorius Ephemerate. We're going to skip that. We got an Elvish Proclaimer Titan build. So this is our first primetime build with Saga, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yep.
It does have Saga, yes.
Guess what, everybody? They're running Saga in Titan.
Which basically enables a turn 3 Amulet of Vigor, which enables a turn 3 Titan very frequently, is my understanding.
Yeah. And this is a Through the Breach version.
Ooh.
Oh, as well. Wow, okay. They got it all going on here. Anybody have any thoughts about this other than watch out for constant turn 3 Titans from now on?
I haven't played against Titan yet. I'm surprised because Titan people love playing Titan. I'm sure I will soon. Because here's the thing, y'all. I mean, this is an hour and 50 minutes into the episode. I am loving playing Modern again.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. It's so fun.
Agreed.
Man, it's nice to take a break from Arena.
I have been so busy in my life. I haven't been able to do much, but I'm excited to hear you guys say that. So I'm glad to get in.
Yeah, Modern rules. But on this deck that we're talking about, it has a couple of Foundation Breakers in the sideboard, which is a card we didn't really talk about during spoiler season because it looked like limited fodder. But as I look closely, I wonder if it's just a solid sideboard card.
Yeah, a lot of Evoke. A lot of decks that want to cast the creatures type thing are using they're liking the Evoke. I'm seeing a lot more Ingot Chewers than I have in a long time.
Yeah, it's because of Vengevine and stuff like
exactly.
that. Okay, Patatina on Rakdos Shadow with some Dalthy Voidwalkers and Ragavan. Shadow and Ragavan, 2 great tastes that taste great together.
Yeah.
Monkey Shadows.
Yeah, Monkey Shadows, Voidwalker, why not? For some extra scary value. It also does, don't forget, Dauthi Voidwalker is a 3/2 unblockable, basically.
Yeah. Don't forget it has Luris in the sideboard too, so we're doing that whole thing.
Yeah.
Seems sweet.
Also, Batuina could win with a ham sandwich, so take it as that might be.
Okay.
All right.
We're going to go even faster now. Lemon Grind,
No,
Skelemental.
let's slow it down.
Stan.
It's just red-black mid-range with Skelementals. It's got Ragavans, though.
This is the Ragavan section of the podcast. You played with Ragavan, right? Stan, did you say? Or
Yeah, I played it in Domain in the Zoo deck, and it was cool. It's cool on turn 1. It's cool with Dash.
It's got little goggles.
What's a little bit annoying is that the Dash trigger happens at your end step, so you can't use the treasure token to recast the same Ragavan. Something to think about if you're trying to do that.
Yeah, that would be broken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that card certainly is not. The treasures are very real, and being able to cast cards from your opponents is awesome and happens a lot. And it happens more often than you might realize just because the CMC of Modern on average is so low that it's really easy to sometimes even cast like worthwhile 1-drops. I grabbed someone's Aether Vial and it was awesome. It was just like, great, now my Domain Zoo deck also has Aether Vial. It didn't. Up next, Angel Duffa on...
again.
Another Angel Luffa deck. Yeah, this time they're playing Lantern Control. Multiple Lantern decks.
Yeah, this one has Urza Saga. I think the other one did too.
No, this person 5-0'd with 2 different builds of the same deck.
Yeah.
And so they both came up here, so they were just different enough from each
Yeah,
other.
they've got some Dauthi Voidwalkers on the side. Yeah, let's move on.
We'll keep it going. Yep. WOTC Andrew WB on Mardu Reanimator. What do you think you get to 5-0 because you work at WotC? Come on, Andrew WB.
They probably changed their winning record.
Andrew B.
This deck is weird. Like it's like a mashup of like Mardu Reanimator, but then also it's like an Electro Dominance and Crashing Footfalls thing, and then like I don't know. It's all over the place. I don't know how it wins exactly. It's got like some Bone Shards. It's got some Fatal Push. I don't know. Cool.
Yeah, it's like a pile of good cards, and it's another one with Persistent Unmarked Grave working together.
I love Bone Shards. I think we'll see more of that card.
Same. All right. Kadune
Hammer time.
EC. Hammer
With
time.
Urza Saga. Weird that
Surprise.
you want more affinity for artifacts type stuff in your... Oh, wait. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It grabs your Colossus Hammer in this deck.
Hey, thanks for that note. Onward. Slay It with Roses. Domain Zoo. Already talked about it. LTL Dude 123 Sultai Urza Artifact. His synergy.
Yeah, that's my name for it.
This one
know.
has Lannis Cryptozoologist as well.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
A new card that we didn't really talk about, as well as Chatterfang Squirrel General.
Yes, but what are we really talking about with this deck?
Upheaval.
LTL Dude. We are talking about this is an upheaval.
What is up?
Correct.
What do you do with the upheaval? What am I missing?
You make a whole bunch of mana,
Yeah.
and then you cast Upheaval, and then you replay as many cards as you can with the mana that you had floating.
But to me, this looks like a token creation deck, which is why I don't get the upheaval. Like it's a token combo deck, right?
You're making treasures, and then you replay your stuff.
Oh, I like
basically.
it. Yeah, sounds great.
So, or you tap your artifacts with Urza, because you made a food or whatever. Because with Academy Manufacturer and Urza, when Academy Manufacturer makes 3 tokens, suddenly you have 3 Sapphire Moxes.
I think Mana Symbol has been streaming this deck, so check out their channel, their Twitch channel, to see what it's about.
Nice.
Okay.
Antoine 57437. What are they on? Bant Blink. Bant Blink gets some tutor upgrades in the side. It also has Imperial Recruiter is 4-color Blink.
Yep, just a little bit though. It's only playing 1 Solitude. It's got Imperial Recruiter in the side.
It's blinking. Barizzle on Green Elves. You get the idea of what Green Elves is doing is adding Korean Ranger and doing cool stuff.
Still Ranger.
Bubsy. I love that PlayStation game. Grixis Death Shadow with Ragavan. What do you need more than Ragavan? If in a deck like this, you have early removal and early disruption to get your Ragavans through. And
I got to tell you, I didn't really think that Ragavan would be alongside Shadow, but it makes some sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need something early because you're like, well, my life's still really high. What else am I doing?
Right. All right. Golgari Food by Villaboy.
All right. This is like the closest to what we played, right? I don't think there's any Hollow Vine decks in this list.
Yeah, that's super weird to me that there isn't. I probably wouldn't have played it that much if there was. But this deck...
Oh, the reason why is there's one that's like a hollow crab vine later and messed us up.
Okay. So this deck is the Feasting Troll King version of the food Asmo deck that was floating around towards the beginning of last week, or towards the beginning when the cards were available.
Yeah.
It does seem to have fallen a little bit out of favor. Originally people were doing the bartered cow thing, and now they're not really doing that anymore. So, but because everybody's kind of focused on Oval Chase Daredevil as being the card that's the right discard payoff at this point.
Yeah. This has 4 Finale of Devastation.
Yes. So Doomwake has been doing that quite a bit, is my understanding from his Twitter.
Cool. Good card. Weird.
I think we're going to be back to do a legit dive down on this whole archetype of these cards, because it feels like this is still really important to this new emerging modern.
MTGO player M. Hayashi on Whitehammer with nothing new, I don't think.
Actually, so 4 Sanctifier on Vec.
Yes.
Main.
Good card.
Next up, Logic is back. _Logic with humans, with Esper Sentinel, Prelate. Cool. Pass. It's still humans. It's still good.
I like the Lavinia on the side for all the Cascade shenanigans and Evoke shenanigans.
All right, we have 15 decks to get through still, Shane. Are we doing all of these, or are we going to skip a bunch?
We're skipping
all
like
right,
4.
You take us.
Okay, Doomwake. Weird. Speak of the Doomwake. On Izzet Delver, this is legit Izzet Delver with 4 actual Delver, 4 Dragon Raid Channeler, 4 Murktide Regent, and 2 Subtlety. If you want to delve or do delvey type, if you want to literally delve and cast Delver of Secrets, Doomwake has a list for you.
Yeah, don't sleep on the fact that there's 4 Counterspell and 3 Unholy Heat in this list as well.
If these are legitimate cards, this is identifying good cards, perhaps. I don't know what their thoughts on Murktide Regent are.
Yeah, this also looks really similar to Legacy Izzet Delver right now. They've also started playing Dragon Rage Channeler and Murktide Regent, though they're running Ragavan. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get there too.
Yeah, I love the story a lot of times where people are, you know how it is, like, where they're like, well, you can play 1 mana threats more powerfully in Legacy because there's less spot removal than there is in Modern, but like Ragavan's still pretty good, as we're seeing in other decks. So
Saffron Olive, weird. Who's that? This is the closest thing actually to the Hollow Vine deck that I think, Dave, both you and I played this week.
Yes.
This one has the Bartered Cow tech and Feasting Troll King, which were not in my deck. Doesn't have this has the blazing. This doesn't have blazing root wall. Yes, it does. Okay, so this is just kind of like the do Hollow Vine stuff, but you also have blazing root walla and Asmo and the Underworld Cookbook. And I had a lot of fun playing this deck this week.
Yeah,
it's a blast.
What this deck has that the other deck that we played. So what our deck had was we had Ox of Agonis,
yes,
and we had Phoenix, and we had the discard 1/2, like the 1 mana menace.
Oh yeah, Insolent Neonate, a Singleton Flamewake Phoenix, and like you said, a few Ox of Agonis, which I think is nice tech. So I don't know if that's the right build, but it is a lot of fun to play Hollow One again.
Yeah, I think it's good.
It's good for sure.
In fact, this next deck, Hold On Dodge, is kind of what you're describing. It's Asmore, Vengevine with Hedron Crabs and Oxen.
I cannot imagine that it's worth splashing blue just for the Hedron Crab. I could be wrong. I just can't imagine.
Shane, splashing colors is easy.
Always worth it.
It really is. Okay, Surcase with Amulet Titan playing Urza Saga and Yavimaya. I think that's all we need to say that. Merc Savage playing Jun Shadow with Dragon Rage Channeler.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, this is a list that I thought would be around that turns out it's around.
Savok 4-color Cascade Control. A little bit different here. It's got 4 Shardless, 4 Fire and Ice, and Obsidian Charma on the side, I think. This one has 4 Nahiri and Emrakul. I think it's what it's trying to do is trying to control via cascading into like Crashing and Footfalls and then buying enough time to Nahiri up an Emrakul. That's one of your win cons here.
Yeah. And drawing Emrakuls is bad in decks like this, but it has that 1 Valakut Awakening to put it on the bottom of your library.
Do it.
All right. XX Killer SO1 playing Mono Red Prowess.
Yeah. What does it have importantly?
Luris.
For Ragavan.
Oh, I mean Ragavan.
Yeah, it's got some white for the sideboard cards, but yeah, it's basically Mono Red Prowess with Ragavan.
Interesting. I still feel like the white is probably worth having in this deck, but guess we'll see.
Okay. Up next, Affinity Blade by Hybrid 7. Rise and Shine in here. 1 in a blue. It's kind of like you're in Soul sorcery.
Interesting.
4 counterspell as well.
4 Nettlecyst, 4.
Yeah, they just went for all of those.
4 Glintnest Crane. This is 4 Edge Champion. This is like your Affinity Metalcraft. Like, I want indestructible stuff wearing like a Batterskull type thing. Like, this is the combo control type thing.
Lots of bridges as well. This was another card that had sideboard Blossoming Calms, by the way.
Yep, you sure did.
Nailed it.
Interesting. All right, 4 decks to go.
Itaku 1 on Black-White Reanimator.
Another one with the Stoneforge, 3 Stoneforge, just sort of a slightly different build, doing that thing.
And Ephemerate.
Yeah, doing the Ephemerate.
So it does have both Dark Confidant and Archon of Cruelty.
Wow.
Ooh,
That probably hurts.
I'm reanimating my Dark Confidant all the time.
All right, I think we can skip Vermihelen on Boros Taxes featuring Urion, similar to what we discussed. This one has Esper Sentinels and Imperial Recruiters.
Yep. We can skip Sawput Boy on Devoted Devastation. There's no new cards in this. So the last one we have is Kadun Yek on a 5/0, which is Titan.
Selesnya Titan.
Selesnya Titan, no Urza Saga, because it doesn't have your amulet, but it's got Titania.
Yeah, I'm glad we're ending with this deck because this is like our only cool Titania Titan. 2 great tastes that taste great together, as you said, Dave. It's got that, Karn the Great Creator, Dryad, Reclaimer, Excavator kind of loops. Like, you get El Domri's Call to get necessary tools. Karn, you get your Wishboard for your Zurin Orb combo type thing. I think this is a cool deck that we'll see, I think, iterations on.
All right.
Yeah. Somehow we did it.
We should spend 60 seconds. Takeaways, surprises, and what do you think might be the current best deck in the format?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I played against enough legitimate decks. I played against a surprising amount of like old decks or just like stuff that wasn't that different. Like I played against like Soul Sisters with like a Johnny's Pridemate, my friends.
Yeah, I know. That made you really upset.
Yeah, they won. That's why.
That deck is always around.
Yeah, it always will be. I don't know. I think I'm really excited. I'm excited to keep playing Modern. I like when I was saying in chat with you all was like, I want to test this deck and this deck and this deck, and I have no time for it. I'm like, man, I wish we could talk about 8 different decks today. But I think it's we talked about like 87.
Remember we did 100 decks for our 100th episode? Kind of felt like that again.
It did, didn't it? Really surprised and impressed by how many Stoneblade decks there were. And it's just like, let's just blink.
Why?
I think it's because Ephemerate is like the new best white card in the format.
People love Stoneblade.
Well, and also plus with Solitude and Grief, there seemed like there was a lot that centered on that whole idea of it's Stoneforge and Ephemerate and Solitude and Grief, and then build flavor to taste from there. Stan, what are you going to play this week?
Well, I definitely need to try Kyrian Ranger in Modern. I definitely would need to try Stoneforge with Grief. I haven't cast a Grief yet. I feel like playing Asmore is important for a holistic understanding of what's happening in Modern right now, but that deck just doesn't look that interesting to me. So maybe I'll let you guys handle it until we have to do a proper deck dive and I'm forced to play it.
Yeah.
How about you, Dave? What are you trying to play?
I'm probably going to try this Delver deck.
Which one?
I'm probably going to try the Doomwake list that we saw. I'm probably going to try our, I'm going to go back to blue-red. Maybe I'll try the mono-red Phoenix list that Everett shared out on Twitter a little bit before this. I think I'm going to go back to my roots. I'm going to get off the Asmore decks. I like playing Hollow Vine, but I think I'll probably hit pause for a little bit. I didn't do that great with it last night, so.
You know what it does.
Yeah.
Should we do a Sleep Believe Heave next week?
Man, I don't know. It's hard to know. Like it's super dynamic time, and like it's really hard to focus on 3 decks. But maybe things will start coalescing around like certain power tiers. So,
but that's a good reason to do Sleep Believe Heave because we get to do whatever we want and just rate it.
Yeah, why limit ourselves to 3 decks? Let's Sleep Believe as many decks as we can.
Sure, I promise nothing, listeners.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's right.
And with that lack of promises, our show's over. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast or just reach out, you can tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word, or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. Join our super secret Slack channel. Get some swag. Shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring our show and making this week's episode possible. We got to play with a bunch of cool decks, and you can too by signing up for Mana Traders. And if you use promo code TheDiveDown2021, all one word, you'll get 15% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. And again, thank you to everyone who's been using our promo code lately. We see you. We appreciate it very, very much. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and play more Modern.